lives, those things that contribute to our dignity and our well-being, making sure that healthcare is not a function of fate or luck, but is a universal human right upon which you can depend. It's primary care, it's mental health care, and it's every woman making her own decisions about her own body and having access to the care to make that happen. It's making sure that we follow your lead and free ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, embrace renewable wind and solar, and the high-paying, high-skill, high-wage jobs that come with that. And then, following the lead of Robert Smalls, who led on public education in this state and for the country, let's make sure that the teachers of South Carolina and throughout this country are paid a true living wage. We do that, then we are doing right by our fellow Americans. We are living up to our potential and to our promise, and we will no longer create the fertile ground for demagogues who will exploit our frustration at the dysfunction of our government and our inability to deliver, to direct our anger at immigrants and people who are vulnerable and have no defense against the most powerful. That is our opportunity right now. That is why I'm here to listen to you, and that is why I'm running to serve you as the next president of the United States. Thank you all for having us out. Really appreciate it. All right, Cougars. Okay, here we go. We are now going to, I think Allegra is going to facilitate some questions from the audience, or Cynthia's going to. All right, Cynthia's right here. If you can get her attention, she'll bring you a microphone. And we just need to get this second mic turned on.
Okay, let's see. We're going to borrow yours.
Okay, no problem.
Here we go.
Beto, welcome to Charleston, South Carolina.
Thank you for having me.
So you mentioned solar. That's actually great. That's what I do for a living, is I sell solar panels. Sustainable energy is really important. But my question's not about that. I saw in March on Twitter a video. You were at a town hall meeting just like this in Cleveland, and someone asked you specifically about third trimester abortions, and you said that it's a decision left up to the mother. So my question is this: I was born September 8th. 1989, and I want to know if you think on September 7th, 1989, my life had no value.
Of course I don't think that, and of course I'm glad that you're here. But you referenced my answer in Ohio, and it remains the same. This is a decision that neither you, nor I, nor the United States government should be making. That's a decision for the woman to make. We want her to have the best possible access to care and to a medical provider, and I'll tell you the consequence of this attack on women's right to choose. And I listened to you, and I heard your question. I'm answering it. And the attack on Roe versus Wade, which we thought was the settled law of the land, and unless we had any illusion that the achievements that we've made are protected forever, or that progress is inevitable, that has been shattered right now. And I want to tell you some of the consequences of this. In my home state of Texas, thanks to these trap laws that make it harder for providers to offer the full spectrum of reproductive care, more than a quarter of our family planning clinics have closed. And it has made us one of the epicenters of this maternal mortality crisis, because not only can you not get safe legal access to an abortion, you cannot get access to a cervical cancer screening or a family planning provider, or in a state that refused to expand Medicaid, any provider at all. And we are losing the lives of women in our state as a result. I don't question the decisions that a woman makes. I mean, only she knows what she knows, and I want to trust her with that. So I appreciate the question. Thank you. Yep.
Hello, Beto. Hello, Beto. Thank you for being here. My name is Joseph Willingham. I wish nothing but blessings on you and your family.
Thank you.
My question is, as president, what would you want to do in your first 100 days in office in order to begin repairing what has been done to our country by the current president?
I'm tempted to ask for 100 days to give you the answer, given what has happened during this administration. We talked about those kids who are kept in cages. Many of you have heard about the Border Patrol station outside of El Paso in Clint, Texas, where the administration inexplicably argued that those kids, again, who just survived a 2,000-mile journey by foot, much of it, some of it atop of a train known as the Beast or La Bestia, the administration argued that they did not deserve a change of clothes. The toddlers should not have diapers. Kids didn't deserve toothbrushes and toothpaste. They were living and sleeping in their own squalor. Not to be too graphic, but for those parents who've had a little kid without a diaper, they are shitting on the floor. And that cold concrete floor in their own shit is where they are sleeping. Without their folks, being cared for by other kids who they have never met before. It's really important that we try to envision it, to imagine that level of suffering so that we are compelled finally to act, and it can help explain how we lost the lives of 7 children in our care to things like the flu. So freeing those kids, rejoining them with their families, promising to never criminalize another asylum seeker again, allowing them the dignity to live in a community with family, with our help, with our care, is a great place to start. We mentioned the rise in hatred and intolerance, the fact that it doesn't just offend our sensibilities, but that we've seen a rise in hate crimes 3 of the last 3 years. What about overturning the transgender troop ban so that we recognize the service of every American? Nominating those to the Supreme Court who understand a woman's right to choose, understand that corporations are not people, understand the full civil rights of every single American, and then being in every single courtroom in this country, wherever that is litigated, and then working with our friends and allies in Congress to back this up legislatively. I think that's an important place for us to work. And then this, I served on the Veterans Affairs Committee for 6 years. Live in a community that has been distinguished by service to country, El Paso, Texas, home to Fort Bliss. I've seen those service members go off to war. I've seen them come back and transition into civilian life, unable to get into the VA. To see a psychologist or a psychiatrist who could save their life from the PTSD that they carry with them. We lose more than 20 veterans a day, every day, by their own hands. So first, let's make sure that we have the resources in the VA to take care of all those who come back from having borne the battle. And then 2, let us end the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria, in Libya, in Yemen, and Somalia, and bring those service members back home to this country. Sign the Paris Climate Agreement. Take the lead globally on climate change. Make sure that we lead the fight on $15 an hour as a base wage in this country. Elevate unions, make sure that they can represent working Americans, create more apprenticeships to train working Americans. That's just the first 15 minutes of my first day in office. But you get an idea that there is so much, and you said this, there's so much that we have to roll back, but then there's so much that we have to lead on, and we have to start right from the beginning. Those are some areas that we could work on. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening.
Evening.
How are you?
I'm good.
First of all, thank you for marching with us during the 1199B strike.
Absolutely.
The nurses fought for everything that you're fighting for today 50 years ago, which is why I am here standing to ask this question. I'm Millicent Trey Middleton, the Sea Island coordinator, as well for the Democrats, as well as the vice president for the Women's Democrats. But our main concern is our education. What are you going to do to help with the school to the prison pipeline that has targeted our children from their youthful days to be failures, to be cast out, and to not even have an opportunity at a successful life?
Some have made the case, and you're making it right now, that in some parts of the country, segregation in public education is worse today in 2019 than it was in 1954 on the eve of Brown versus Board of Education. You have an annual funding shortfall for majority minority majority school districts of $23 billion a year that we are underfunding their education, their teacher pay, their facilities, their services, their technology, and there is a consequence to that. We propose in the first year of our administration a permanent education fund of $500 billion, the proceeds from which are spent to reduce that funding gap, in fact, to level it completely. That begins to address equality, but it does not get at equity. To do that, we propose $500 million a year for world-class teacher academies at historically black colleges and universities and minority-serving institutions, creating a teacher pipeline to combat that school to prison pipeline, to ensure that that teacher in front of the classroom looks like the students that she's instructing and teaching. Having that connection at a very basic human level is so fundamental to that child's success. And then we will make sure that Betsy DeVos is replaced by a Secretary of Education who has experience in the classroom. That's the way that we make this better. Thank you for asking. Yes.
Good evening, sir. My name is Evelina Moultrie. You can't see me?
I can see you
Move up
now.
a little
Yep.
bit. Okay. My name is Evelina Moultrie. I'm a school bus driver here for Charleston. We have a problem here in South Carolina when we try to go and organize people. We have where the employer are threatening the employees and also threatening us, the people that is going up to try to talk to them. What would you do for labor union as far as for the employees to stop threatening the employees, because it is their right? If the union is so bad, why are the employees fighting so hard to keep them out? Yeah. So what are you going to do about that?
Thank you for the question, and thank you for your commitment to public service. We know this in the O'Rourke family. You know this because you do it every single day. It's very often the driver of that bus who is the first to see signs of hope or signs of distress or despair in a child. And by getting in touch with the school administrator, the teacher, or the parent, the first line of defense to be there for that child when they need it the most. So I want to thank you for your public service and for making the case for being able to organize. And I think one of the challenges that you and I have, and others who believe in what you're saying, is we've got to speak to those who are not yet members of unions, and maybe even more importantly, to those who do not believe in the power of unions, maybe don't understand it, maybe take for granted the gains that unions have won. Here's one way that I would start in South Carolina. We now know that 25% of public school educators leave the profession within the first year in the state. Within 5 years, 50% of those that all of us through our tax dollars have paid to train and educate, who through their own sacrifice and the student loans that they still carry on their backs paid to train and educate themselves, are leaving the profession, creating a teacher shortage, an educator shortage, and a support and administrative staff shortage in this state. Now, that's not only bad for the public school educator and support staff. It's not only bad for the kids in the classroom, it is bad for the taxpayer, for the economy, for the competitiveness of South Carolina. So let's make joining a union and the right to organize something that is fundamental to the success of everyone in South Carolina, everyone in this country. When we show that the gains are shared across the economy as a whole, union member and non-union member alike, I think we have a better chance of bringing in more support and elevating the place and prominence of unions in South Carolina and in Texas and in the places that you are least likely to find them today. So you have my commitment to do that with the rest of America. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it. Thank you.
A little bit over here in the same direction. Here we go. Over here.
Gotcha.
There we go. And we have time for 3 more questions.
Hi, Beto. In as specific as possible, how do you plan not only to stabilize, but also to increase the country's financial economy? And in what time frame do you think your plans will actually, you'll be able to start enacting any of that?
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. Folks, Democrats, Republicans, independents alike, this is the moment where the Democratic Party reclaims the mantle of fiscal responsibility and stewardship in this country. This president, that Republican-controlled Senate, as you probably know, are running deficits now that amount to $1 trillion a year, adding to $22 trillion in debt, following a tax cut of $2 trillion that flows disproportionately to the wealthiest and to corporations at a time of record profit making in those corporations, record income inequality, and record wage stagnation for working Americans. So how do we meet this challenge? One, we roll back the worst of the Trump tax cuts. So that corporate rate that went from 35% to 21%, the specific you asked for, take it to 28%, which generates hundreds of billions of dollars. Tax capital gains at the same rate that you tax wages and salaries and ordinary income. You generate hundreds of billions of dollars. End the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, and Libya, which have added trillions of dollars to the debt. Focus resources on those veterans and former service members who bore the battle, put their life on the line. Make investments in teachers and schools, healthcare, wage growth, and a minimum wage, and you will grow your way out of this deficit spending at the same time that you're cutting costs by rolling back some of the worst of the tax cuts and the military spending, and you begin to get this fiscal house in order. Now, this was a long time coming, starting with the first George W. Bush unpaid for tax cut. It will take us a while to get out of it, but those are some of the preliminary steps that we could take to be on the right path. Thanks for asking the question.
My name is Magali Hernandez. I am a first-generation high school graduate and a first-generation college student.
All right. Congratulations.
And it has been said that on your first day of your presidency, you would use executive order to reunite families. And I wanted to ask you, can you be more specific with that?
Absolutely. So, as you probably know, we still have children in our custody, in some cases whose parents have been deported back to their countries of origin. So think of our own moms risking their lives, traveling 2,000 miles to bring us here, and instead of finding shelter or safety or refuge, it is literally your worst nightmare. Your child taken from your breast by force, if necessary, which we have done. You were remanded into custody of Department of Justice, then over to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and then sent back to Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador, very often without being able to track your whereabouts or your ability to track your child's whereabouts. This country should move every mountain, bear any burden to reunite those families. That's the most fundamental responsibility, I think, that we have, and we should be able to pursue it. We should ensure that those families who are detained right now are released and reunited with family members, and then we should end a policy implemented by the Trump administration. They are sharing the fingerprints of these kids who are in Border Patrol custody right now with Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is sharing the fingerprints of family members who are in the United States, so that if somebody comes forward to claim a child and say, that's my nephew who's in custody right now, they can come to my house and be with me. If they're in the ICE database, they are arrested, detained, and deported. It has sent a chilling effect throughout the country, and families are not coming forward. We will roll back that policy, remove that policy, so that we make family reunification paramount and the number one priority of the short term of our immigration policy, and then never again break up another family, never again treat them as criminals. I mentioned rewriting our immigration code so that we prioritize not just family reunification, but folks who want to work a job or come to school here, a legal, safe, quick path to do that, so we don't incentivize going around the law right now. So I will make sure that we make it a priority and we put the resources in place to reunite those families. Thanks for asking.
Hi, my name is Taylor, and after my 4 years at the awesome College of Charleston, I'm hoping to go into genocide prevention. As I'm sure you're aware, there is a genocide in Myanmar that has been ongoing for the past 2 years. The Western world has done little to nothing to assist in this genocide or to help the Rohingya victims who are being persecuted.
Yeah.
The United States is included in this group of countries who has done little to nothing. As president, what concrete steps would you take to not only help the Rohingya minority in Myanmar, but also to end human rights crises everywhere?
Yeah. Thank you. What a great question. Grateful for your choice of career. So let's use the full diplomatic force of the United States to protect the Rohingya Muslim minority in Burma/Myanmar, to either relocate there, or if we cannot assure their safety, to find some other suitable place for them to be. But the priority should be returning to their homes, to their communities, to make sure that we do not reward or turn a blind eye to ethnic cleansing in Myanmar or anywhere in this world. And then use meetings like the one that President Trump is at or was just at with the G7 in France to bring the other Western democracies together on issues in Myanmar or Saudi Arabia, which is bombing Yemen into the last century and into the next greatest humanitarian crisis we've seen. 7 million people who are on the brink of starvation or dehydration in one of the most water-scarce countries on the face of the planet. We have similar challenges in other parts of the country, but right now, instead of embracing democracy and standing up for the rights of minorities in these countries, you have a president who's enabling strongmen and dictators and thugs. He literally said he was falling in love with Kim Jong-un of North Korea, embraces Vladimir Putin, Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, who's doing this, who killed an American-based journalist with complete impunity. President Trump literally said this, and I mentioned that the more obscene the injustice, the harder it is for us to take in. He said, but they buy a lot of weapons from the United States of America, so we don't have to worry about that right now. What do we stand for anymore? And I love what you stand for, and I want to make sure that we follow that lead and that we take a role nationally to bring the eyes of the world to these challenges, make sure that we stop them, and guarantee the freedom of people all over the world. So thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Grateful. Okay, do I give the mic to them? Or, yeah.
Beto, we'd just like to thank you so much for coming. We'd be remiss if we didn't get you a T-shirt before you left. So just thank you again very much.
Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, of course.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yes. Thank you all very much for having us out. We will see you next time we're in Charleston. Les agradezco y gracias. Nos vemos.
All right, we're going to step right here. And we're going to take. If you want to stay and take a picture, if you could please get in line. We're going to have a line starting right here where my hands are up. This is the beginning of the line. And we'll get to everybody, so just be patient, please.